I mean, this is my life. This is my childhood. I grew up in the Palisades. This is devastating. It's never going to be the same. I'm never going to be able to show my kids where I grew up. It's all gone. It's all gone.
So our fires are basically going to be driven by the high heat, high winds, and dry vegetation.
We got the green grass out there right now, but once we get to the heat in the summer, that will dry out quickly, and that is going to be a fuel.
But this is not the time to get complacent. So best case scenario is managing it early.
Well, as the last couple of months have showed us, there is no longer a fire season in California. The danger is real year-round. We thank you so much for joining us for this very important discussion on wildfires in California. I'm Liz Gonzalez with Fox 26 News in Fresno. We've brought together a group of experienced meteorologists at our Sinclair Broadcast Group stations to provide you with perspective and context as we look at the fire threat throughout the summer. Ilya Naiman brings viewers the weather at KBAK and KBFX in Bakersfield. He has more than 20 years experience working in newsrooms in Oklahoma City and across Southern California, tracking everything from floods, ice and snowstorms, tornadoes, and the severe drought. Brian Schofield is the evening meteorologist at KRCR in Redding. He forecasts for northern and central Sacramento Valley, the Redwoods and northern coast of California. He's also worked in Las Vegas and Palm Springs. And Fox 26 meteorologist Chris Kuiper's career has taken him from Bakersfield to Chico, Redding, and even Alaska before arriving in Fresno, where he forecasts for a region that spans across the central San Joaquin Valley, Sierra National Forest, Yosemite, Kings Canyon National Parks. So we're going to start with looking at conditions across the state. What are you seeing now, and how is that fire threat looking through the summer? We're going to start with the Northstate in Redding. Brian, tell us.
I think we've been blessed so much. The climate and drought report just came out for March, and the water year has produced 100, believe it or not, 100 to 150% of normal rainfall. We are on track with just a wonderful year. And actually, we've had a good couple of years, but for the most part, this is all from, let's say, Napa North, not just the central and northern Sacramento Valley, but Yolo North and Placer County and north. And everyone seems to be doing very well on the rainfall, to the point where they're saying there is no drought in the North State.
Thank you so much. Now, Chris, let's check in with you. How about the central San Joaquin Valley?
Our situation may be a little bit different in that we had we got a barking dog. We also had a slow start to our rain season, and it really didn't get going good until about February or so. And then we had kind of a gangbusters March, and even April's been okay as well. So kind of a late, delayed start, but it finally got up to us, and we're at about 85% of average where we should be for this time of the year. Interesting thing, though, that late start to the season, we get a lot of rain in March and not so much during the regular season. That really promotes heavy grass growth in the foothills and in the valley. And those heavy grasses have they can certainly provide the fuels for fires burning on later on in the season there towards the fall and such. So we got the green grass out there right now, but once we get to the heat in the summer, that will dry out quickly, and that is going to be a fuel not for the forest in the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada, but in the foothills and in the valley and parts of the Coast Range as well. We're setting the stage for having heavy fuel growth there in the form of these grasses because of the late start to our rainy season and the heavy rain that we had in the month of March.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. So we're going to expand on that in just a matter of minutes. Now let's check in with Ilya to find out what it's looking like over in Bakersfield and Southern California.
Well, we can certainly relate to all of that green grass across the South Valley. We had a late start, a hit or miss season until March came, and then many days of rainfall sporadically occurring across our area. That has led to the new vegetation. But as you know, living out here, it just takes a month or so before the green grass becomes yellow, and that heightens the fire danger. That's normal around here. Obviously, the drought extends more significantly the further south you go into SoCal, but across the South Valley, we're kind of on the bridge between the Central Valley and the Southern California area. And so our fires are basically going to be driven by the high heat, high winds, and dry vegetation. And so right now we're just seeing the green grass. We're happy about that. But as we look ahead into the coming months, as we know, that grass might become more flammable. And obviously we'll keep a much more closer eye on that as conditions warrant out there.
Okay, we're going to be checking in with you in just a matter of minutes again, but we are looking ahead to how the coming summer and how severe the wildfire threat may be. Let's take a look at what happened in 2024. It was a severe wildfire year. More than 1 million acres burned. To put that in perspective, that's the equivalent to 166,000 square miles, 41 times the size of Los Angeles County. These fires burned to the state's north and south, and they turned out to be good preparation for the catastrophic fires in LA County.
30 years in the military, and I've been overseas, and I've seen some devastation, and I thought this was a war zone.
2024 was a year that put California's firefighters to the test.
Vigorous, a very, very strong fire season.
The Park Fire to the north, the Burrell Fire in Kern County, the Lightning Complex Fire in Fresno County, and dozens more burning a combined 1 million acres.
The interesting thing was it started early. It started in April. We were burning, and unusually, we were burning in the north part of California. Generally, you wouldn't see any kind of fire until maybe late May, early June.
With conditions, Acuna says, were years in the making.
It really is a build-up since 2021. You have a look at all these incidents where we had large amounts of water falling from the sky, allowing for large amounts of fuel, which we'll define as grasses and brush. If it doesn't burn, then the next level of growing and dying lays on top of it, and on top, and on top. And it ends up being essentially like a haystack.
And that haystack, combined with high winds, led to the perfect storm just days into the 2025 season, as wildfires tore through the Southern California coastline in Altadena in Los Angeles County. The Palisades and Eaton fires destroying a combined 37,000 acres and more than 16,000 structures.
CAL FIRE, as large it is with 12,500 employees, is not large enough to fight all the fires. So
reinforcements called in from across the West and beyond, and a greater investment from Sacramento, at least for now.
We did bring on a lot of firefighters on an emergency hire. Whether or not that is a permanent item is something that the legislature will have to take up, because of course we do follow the budget.
There's been a lot of debate about how local and state officials responded to the fire once it started. But Ilya, talk to us about the weather conditions that made that fire spread so quickly in that area.
Well, to start things off, it was a much different 2024 to 2025 than the last two seasons that had prolific amounts of rainfall. Above average precipitation in the preceding years led to an enormous amount of vegetation growth across Southern California. And then this year comes in starting off a lot drier. The Santa Ana winds blow in, so you've got a rainy season that was late in showing up. Enter December to January, typically the start of the significant amounts of rain. Not so much. This year began a lot drier, and then the winds blew in. These were not just regular Santa Ana winds. We had winds that were gusting 80 to 100 miles an hour, not only in the localized canyons and passes, but into populated parts of the San Fernando Valley. So we had these prolific winds, hurricane force gusts that just blew out the power, down the power lines, and whatever flame began was spreading so much quicker than the fire department could even get on site, much less put it out. And there were a lot of other issues that came in the ensuing days. So these were particularly dangerous situation, fire weather watches and red flag warnings that were issued by the NWS, one after another out of Oxnard. And so this was a significant situation that literally was not necessarily started, you might ask, by the winds, but it was significantly impacted, so much so that it led the fire to become out of control, and then multiple fires broke out at the same time. One in Palisades, the other, the Eaton fire, just to the east, and so the resources were spread thin. The weather conditions were about as extreme as they could get during the time that we would normally be picking up whopping amounts of rainfall instead.
Ilya, you talked about the Santa Ana winds. For those people who may not be familiar with that, what makes that different from just really strong winds that we see in any part of California?
Well, a typical Santa Ana wind setup is when you have a ridge of high pressure that is basically like this dome of very stable air that gets really heavy. And that stable air tends to rush out to where it can go. Now, the passes, which are the channels in between mountain ranges, are openings that allow that air to rush out. And it just happens to be that the openings are facing into certain corridors of Southern California. And these corridors then help the air to rush through them and intensify at speeds that are dramatically stronger between those mountains than they would be going on either side. And so you can go a few miles away and get winds from calm to 90 miles per hour in just a stretch of a few miles. And when those winds whip through, the humidity goes a lot lower because the winds go down the mountain and they get warmer, the air gets drier, and that helps to fuel the fire.
Making quite the recipe for disaster, as we saw firefighters just could not seem to catch a break in Southern California. Now, Brian, can you talk to us through the drought situation in the state? I know you mentioned you've gotten a lot of rainfall to the north, but what areas are the most severe drought right now? And what does that mean to those areas that could be at a greater risk for fires?
Well, in that same climate report I was mentioning earlier, they're showing the San Joaquin Valley as abnormally dry. So it's in a moderate drought. That's not great, but it's better than Southern California, as you heard from my colleagues, especially with the stronger winds that they're planning to get in autumn. Definitely when you get into Southern California, we're going to extreme to severe conditions. So you're almost at the peak of that kind of danger. And, you throw in those Santa Ana winds, and as you said, they speed up, they heat up, they dry everything out. So it's just going to exacerbate the problems that are already on the ground, which is dry scrub.
Again, a lot of rainfall that the north received. What are we seeing in terms of the growth, and how quickly, realistically, does that dry up?
And it's interesting because you could have some very heavy rain and still weeks later have those rock slides. But those mudslides are a danger that we have to consider. You don't want all your rainfall in one day, 1 week, 1 month. We had quite a busy March, but truly you don't want to have it all like that.
Now, Chris, I'm coming to you. It wasn't quite, as you mentioned, a miracle March, but the central San Joaquin Valley did receive a good amount of rain late in the season. Typically, any rain is a good thing, but what does this do for the brush?
And it was a bit of a late start to our season. We had a good November, and then it kind of dried out in December somewhat. And January was very dry for us. So going into February, we were starting to get pretty far behind. At one point there, around Valentine's Day or so, we were around 50% of average for our rainfall. And then we caught up all of a sudden in a hurry there in March. And so we had a heavy rainfall in that time. And that really caused the grasses in the valley to really explode. And case example here, we can go back to just 2018. We could talk about the Camp Fire, because that winter in 2017 and 2018 in Northern California was a fairly dry winter. Then they had that same kind of heavy rainfall in March. And there's a little experimental station about 30 miles south of Paradise, run by the University of California. And they measure how much grass is grown in a certain area. And they that springtime, they got double, basically, the amount of grass per acre, what they normally get. So that meant for very heavy fuels there going into that 2018 year. And then November 8, 2018, we had the Camp Fire explode, and it was roaring through all that valley grass that had grown through that exceptionally wet March. Not saying that is going to happen at all this year, but certainly we had the fuels getting ready, drying out in place for foothills, and maybe in the valley, but we get fires more substantially in the foothills. We're getting that situation set up for rather thick growth, or rather thick fuels in the foothills because of that heavy rain that we had in March, setting the stage for some heavy grass growth.
Which is where it becomes so crucial for people to really clear that space for firefighters. Now, in doing research for this discussion, I did read about something called the pyrocene, which is a concept that says that we're in a fire age of sorts comparable to the ice age. Is anyone able to explain that theory for us?
Well, it's based a lot on climate, obviously, climate change and human interaction with it. And, their Palisades fire is a good example of that, how you have, a wet season, then a dry. But it's the essence of it is truly, and you guys can jump in too about this, it truly means hotter, more severe and bigger fires. And that's where things get a little scary. We're talking about mega fires.
And the urban wildlife interface is just only expanding. So people are building homes in places now that 50 years ago we didn't have homes, just because there are more people in California or Idaho or Washington or wherever. So people are expanding the home growth into parts of the forest. And so places of a city like Sacramento is going to the east into the Sierra Nevada somewhat there and towards Auburn and places like that. In places that may have 50 years ago, a fire roared through that region there and maybe just scared a few people, and that was it. This time around, those homes have expanded, 20 miles into the foothills, into the Sierra Nevada, and now that same fire burning that same area can devastate 50, 100, 200 homes or so. And so we're expanding our growth into the forest, and that is also could cause additionally more homes, more damage caused in the future by any kind of future fires.
Elliot,
Right,
do you want to jump in as well?
Those are great words for my colleagues up north and central California. Just to add a few ideas, for hundreds and for thousands of years, fires would start usually naturally by a lightning strike or sometimes by Native Americans, and they would burn from the mountains to the beaches. It would take a few months, and then the rainy season would come, put it out, the next thing would happen, the next year after that. So the forests were a lot thinner back then. The brushes were basically cleaned up naturally, if you want to say, and then people came along and fire mitigation comes in. You have firefighters called to put out every fire. You have decades of growth because people don't want fires to burn up to their homes. So you have a situation where when a fire does strike, it can burn through up to a neighborhood with brush that hasn't burned in some cases for many years, sometimes 10, 20 years, even more. And when that occurs, obviously, that fire would burn hotter, more severe, more combustible. And then when you have multiple fires that occur at the same time for various reasons, the resources are stretched super thin. And that creates these explosive situations that tend to repeat because of the factors mentioned above. And so, we have to find a way to deal with this effectively. Otherwise, this situation will just keep repeating.
And Ilya,
I've heard, if I could piggyback on Ilya's comments there, I've heard a lot of folks, a lot of fire officials just talking about healthy fire and just managed prescribed burns and whatnot, just small areas of fire burning places that haven't burned in 50 or 100 years or whatever.
Keep in mind what it is that we are able to control versus what is out of our control. And as we heard CAL FIRE mention earlier, that's why it's become such a priority to strategically place crews where they're seeing these weather conditions are starting to really affect the amount of fire that can spread. Okay, we're going to go around the state again to get your thoughts when it comes to our weather conditions and fire risks this year. What are the best and worst case scenarios in your part of the state? We're going to work our way down the state, starting in the Northstate with Brian in Redding.
All right, well, our best case scenario is the mitigation. You've heard that word thrown around. That's a good one, but they're doing that quite a bit here, not sitting on their laurels, even though we're not in a drought situation. As a matter of fact, snowpack for 2 years straight has been at or above normal. I think the Sierra, Northern Sierra, is at 118% of normal snowpack. That's phenomenal stuff, but this is not the time to get complacent. So best case scenario is managing it early. But worst case scenario is obviously getting complacent. And if we had a dry year or two, if an underwhelming year shows up, then you've heard the word fuels. That's what we will have left from what was green. And I'm looking at my colleagues behind them. I wish I was outside with you guys. It's so green there now, but we know it doesn't take long for that to become brown and dry and become the fuel for enormous wildfires.
Chris, your thoughts on the central San Joaquin Valley?
Our spring our rainy season has not been quite as generous, and so we're a little behind. Unfortunately, the Central Sierra snowpack is not as healthy and robust as the Northern California snowpack, and it is below normal. And so things should be drying out, and the snowpack will be melting off a little quicker, unfortunately. And so that might mean a little bit of an earlier fire season for the higher elevations of the Sierra Nevada in the Central Sierra Nevada. Best case scenario is obviously no major fires. We keep our fingers crossed for that. But it does seem like the foothills do have the potential for the heavy grass growth, that the fuels will be there, and the Central Sierra Nevada in the highest elevations, the snowpack should be about done by July. And so that time, the potential does exist as we get into the fire season. And along the coastline, it is looking like a bit of a La Nina years, which is going to mean the fog on the coastline is going to be pretty good out there, for at least through June or so, the June gloom. So immediately on the coastline, probably should be okay. But once you get inland a little bit, that's when fire dangers does start to increase rather quickly.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. And Ilya, we're going to wrap up with your thoughts in Bakersfield and that part of the state. Best case scenario, worst case scenario.
So according to all of what was said until now, you can see how tied in fire situations are to the weather conditions. Across Kern County, we've got a very diverse climate phenomena. The South Valley, which is the agricultural side of the southern San Joaquin Valley, is very different from the deserts on the other side of the Tehachapis in Sierra Nevada. And we've got these diurnally driven winds, which in the summertime are common and usually a daily occurrence. These winds are dry, they're gusty, and they hit about the time that the vegetation has dried out considerably from the rains of the previous spring and winter. And so the Burrell fire, which was basically the biggest fire in Kern County history, occurred just last summer, and it scorched a huge amount, a large footprint just south of the Lake Isabella area. That was started by a car crash that basically sparked that fire that was out of control for many weeks. Actually, it took them multiple months to finally get it contained into the beginning almost of autumn before the fire was officially put out. Between that time, these winds would drive it up the hill in through communities. Havilah took a direct hit by that. And so this was not a Santa Ana wind. This was just a typical summertime dry winds that occurred. And these winds are with us, whether you like it or not, just about every year. There's not really much you can do about that. All we can do is be aware of the situation, prepare for it as far as the worst case scenario when all the ingredients come together: the dry vegetation, the gusty winds, and the unpreparedness of the communities. The strategic placement of the fire departments ahead of these events could be something that would go and help communities that are at risk. And in our area, a lot of communities are usually at risk when it comes to fire season, or year round for that case, if the season is dry, even into the winter, like Southern California found out just a few months ago. And so that would be something we consider, always being aware of the fire hazard, which is built into living out here. It's normal. It's a part of, daily living, yearly living. But the question we should ask is, what can we do to communicate that challenge to our viewers? And what then can the viewers do to make sure that they create those buffer zones, those spaces around their properties to give them a fighting chance to survive? And if a fire is moving towards the area, to get out of the way as quick as they can. Obviously, it means taking warnings seriously and heeding those alerts whenever they may arise.
Ilya, Brian, and Chris, I want to thank you all so much again for joining us. And thank you at home for joining us as well. We certainly all hope for a safe year ahead and limited wildfires in California. But we know each of you will also be helping your local viewers on YouTube and your local TV station keep them informed when those fires do threaten. Again, we thank you so much for joining us today.